The L in solid stands for Liskov substitution principle, which was initially introduced by Barbara Liskov in 1987. And what the principle says is, let Q with argument x be a property provable about objects x of type T. Then Q with argument y should be provable for objects y of type S, where S is a subtype of T. Probably not the easiest thing to understand. But in much easier terms, what it basically means is that if you have a parent class, say document, with method title that returns a string, and then the subclass that overrides this method, the overridden method should return the same data type so that either one could be used with any code that makes use of this component. In this example, invoice class breaks the Liskov substitution principle because its title method returns array instead of a string, which is what the same method of its parent class returns. In this case, if we were to use the reader class with the instance of the invoice, the call to the read method with echo statement would fail because you cannot echo arrays. Let's have a look at a similar example in the editor. In this example, we have a device class, which has three public properties, name, width, and height, all of which are injected through the constructor. And then we have a resolution method, which returns width and height with the x in between as a string. Then we have a tablet class, which extends this device and override the resolution. And as you can see, this resolution returns array, which indicates that it obviously breaks the Liskov substitution principle. Then we have a user class, which takes the device instance, associates it with its property, internal property device, and then when we call device screen resolution method, we basically delegate this call to the resolution method on the instance of this device. And obviously device might be either the device class or it might be a tablet. Now I have written two tests, one test for the output of the device screen resolution when we are passing through the device instance to the user's device method, and the other one uses tablet to do exactly same thing, and we also expecting the string, but obviously we know that this will fail. So let's quickly run this test and see what it returns. And it tells us that user device test gets correct device screen resolution with tablet instance. Array does not match expected type string, which is what we're expecting, but we're obviously getting array. And this is because at the moment we cannot substitute device with a tablet, even though tablet by extending device is an instance of the device, because the same method in both of these classes returns different data type. This prevents us from being able to substitute the device with a tablet instance. So let's go back to the editor and have a look at how we can actually fix this problem. Now, the first thing to decide is what is going to be easier to return from this resolution. I know that my parent class, which is this device, returns a string, but later on if we go to the tablet, you'll see it returns array, but it doesn't only return the values as array, it also multiplies them by 3. So the first problem that I see here is the inconsistency when it comes to obtain the width and height values. And to fix this, let's create the getters for these properties. Go back to the device. Let's change the visibility for name, width, and height to protect it, because what we're going to do from now on is to use getter functions to obtain these values. Name we could leave there as a property, but because we're doing the other two, let's do getter for the name as well. Okay, so let's start with the public function name, and this will simply will return this name. And let's add some doc block here. It will return a string, get name, and I'm going to use the return type declarations, which are available as of PHP 7. So if you are using PHP lower than version 7, you won't be able to use it. So make sure that obviously if you are using them, then you are running version PHP 7 or higher. So after the method name, bracket, space, colon, and then what data type this method is going to return. In this case, it's going to be a string. Okay, same thing for the width and height, so public function width, and this one will return integer. Let's add some doc blocks. Returns integer, get width, and we are returning whatever is associated with the width property. Next one is going to be for the height. So public function height. This one will also return integer. And this one will be get height. And we are returning value associated with the height property. Okay, so we have our getters now. So we set them through the constructor, they are protected, so subclasses have access to them. Now let's resolve this problem with the inconsistency between these two methods. So resolution, we could return a string, but I think it's going to be easier to return an array and then format it as a string. So what I'm going to do is to remove this method completely from within the tablet, because and now what we can do is to overwrite width and height, public function width, and it's going to return integer, exactly same as the one within the parent class. So get width, and this time we return this width multiplied by 3. As you can see, now we can modify the value, and regardless of which instance of the class we are going to be using, we just gonna call a single method and it will give us the correct value for the width and then obviously for the height as well. So public function height, and again this one is going to return integer as well, and get height this time, and here we also returning this time height, but also multiplied by 3. Okay, and tablet is technically done. Now if we go back to the device, what we want to return from within the resolution is call to this width method and then call to this height method. And obviously because we are within the device now, first of all, if we're going to have an instance of the device, it will call these two methods. So it's going to return just the value associated with the width and height property. But if we have an instance of the tablet, by calling this resolution method, we will trigger these two methods, which will obviously multiply the value associated with the width and height by 3. Okay, so tablet and device is now done. Now let's change the return statement here because it returns array, and let's add the returned value here as well as array. And we can now close this class. Now we still obviously have a problem because we are expecting later on to get the string when we call this resolution method. Now how can we resolve this problem? Well, I think that the best thing to do here would be to have some sort of formatter component which will take an array and then return it as a string formatted in a specific way. Okay, so let's start by creating a new directory within a source directory called formatter. And I'm expecting that there might be many different formatters. And I'm going to start with a subdirectory here, which will be called from array, which will indicate that all formatters within this directory will start by having the array to work with. And then the next subdirectory, which was going to be called toString. So we will take array and we convert it, we format it to a string. And within this toString directory, I'm going to create another class, which will be an interface, and it will declare the contract for all classes that will implement it. So we're going to start with contract, and it's going to be within the namespace app, then formatter. Then we have from array and then toString, and it's an interface. So let's click OK. If you don't use PHP Storm, if you don't have these sort of macros, simply make sure that you have a correct namespace and then interface contract set of brackets. And here we're going to declare the method that each of the class implementing this interface will have to have, and this the name of the method is simply going to be format. So public function format. We are not providing the implementation because it's an interface. Now this format method will take array as an argument, and it will return string. This is why I have this contract within this toString directory, because if it was In the main formatter, we wouldn't know what data type we are passing through because it might have been a completely different formatter. It might be formatting from a string to array or anything like this. But because we are formatting from array to a string, that's why it's within this toString directory. Okay, let's add some dog block here. It will take array, return a string. Let's say format array as string. So that's our contract. Now, the next and the only class we're actually going to be creating during this course is going to be called xFormatter. Why xFormatter? Because this one will return the array as a string concatenated with this X symbol in between, the way we wanted it to have. So I'm going to start with the public. Actually, before we do this, let's just implement this contract here. And now we need to add this method. And this method will simply return implode function. We are going to be imploding with the X symbol and then our array. And that's all this format method will do. Now the only thing that's left, if we now save the file and close it, is to apply this formatter from within our client, this user class. Let's open our user class, and what we are going to do is to take an argument here for this device screen resolution. And this argument is going to be this contract which we've just created. So let's use contract, this app formatter array to string contract, but I'm going to alias it as array to string contract. And I'm just going to use the name and type hinted here as an argument, and then we're going to use this formatter. Actually, rather than contract, we could call it formatter, probably a little bit better. So we can use any array to string formatter here. If there was any other, we could pass it through as well if we wanted the output to be formatted slightly different, but it still needs to return a string. And now I'm going to change this return tag here as well to string, and I will also add the return type here as a string to make sure that the string is exactly what we're getting. Okay, we will make call to this device resolution, but what we need to do is to wrap it with this formatter and then format method, because this resolution will return an array. This array later on will be taken by this formatter here, which is going to be xFormatter. It's going to be taken, imploded with this X in between, and it will return obviously the string which this implode function will give us. Okay, so now all this should work just fine. If we save it and close this file, and from within our test, the only thing that we need to do, you can see this obviously device screen resolution method is now highlighted because it requires the argument, this formatter, is to pass the instance of this formatter through as an argument. So new xFormatter. And let's just import this one. We don't need brackets at the end. So we are importing this right at the top here. And we do the same for the other call to this method. And if we now run the test, we still get a problem here because obviously now we have different dimensions. It gives me 3072 to 304, which is correct because obviously with the tablet we are multiplying these values by 3. So that's what we should get. Let's just quickly copy this because that's actually the correct value. I've just put exactly same one as it was for the device. Obviously that would fail anyway. If we change it to the correct values, if we run the test again, and there we go, we have 2 tests, 2 assertions, all of which are passing. So we've managed to refactor our code, remove this unnecessary method for the resolution from within the tablet, and we've converted the one within the device to return an array, which previously obviously was returning a string, and we've added this formatter, which is now formatting the array to the format that we're actually expecting. In this specific case, it did make sense to put this method within the device, return the array, and obviously remove it from within the tablet class, and then just use the formatter to format it as a string. But it doesn't mean that whenever you are refactoring your code to comply with the Liskov substitution principle, that you will always have to remove the method from within the child class. Sometimes you may just do some work to make sure that the data type is basically the same as within the parent class.